2 months. Uncomfortable. I didn't say anything. Why? Only my cup. I didn't ask questions. Because once you say something like that out loud, there's no going back. Instead, I watched. I paid attention to things I had ignored for years. The way he moved in the kitchen. The way he handled the cups. The way mine was always placed just a little closer to me. Patterns matter. And patterns reveal intention. So one morning, I made a decision. I switched the cups. It was small. Almost meaningless. Just a simple movement. While his back was turned. When he came back, nothing changed. No reaction. No hesitation. He picked up the cup he believed was his. And handed me the other one. Everything looked normal. But it wasn't. That morning, I didn't drink. I watched him instead. I watched him take a sip. I watched his face. I waited. Nothing happened. Not right away. Just another quiet morning. Until later that day. Marcus came home early. That alone was unusual. But what stood out more was how he looked. Pale. Slower than usual. His voice lacked energy. He said it was just a headache. Maybe something he ate. Something small. Something easy to dismiss. But I didn't dismiss it. Because I remembered the cups. The next morning, I did it again. I switched them. And again. He drank from the one that had never been meant for him. And again. By the end of the day, something was wrong. By the third time, I stopped guessing. By the fourth time, I stopped hoping I was wrong. And by the end of the week, I understood something. That changed everything. Whatever had been happening was never meant for him. It had been meant for me. And that realization didn't come with panic. It came with clarity. Cold. Quiet. Unavoidable clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. Because once you see something clearly, you don't get the luxury of confusion anymore. So I didn't stop. I kept switching the cups. Every single morning. Not for revenge. Not yet. For confirmation. Days turned into weeks. And during those weeks, Marcus changed. At first, it was subtle. Then it wasn't. He became distant. Distracted. Phone calls. Taken in other rooms. Messages. He wouldn't open around me. Conversations. That ended the moment I walked in. Something wasn't just wrong. Something was hidden. And I could feel it. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet way. The kind of feeling that sits in your chest and doesn't leave. And once that feeling settles in, everything starts to look different. Every word. Every silence. Every small detail. My hands didn't shake when I saw the policy. That's what scared me the most. Not fear, not panic, just a strange kind of stillness, like my mind had already accepted what my heart hadn't caught up to yet. I sat there for a long time, staring at my name printed neatly on the document, followed by a number that didn't feel real. It wasn't just money. It was intention. It was planning. And it meant this wasn't something sudden. This had been building for a while. That night, I watched Marcus differently. Every movement, every word, every silence started to feel deliberate. He asked me how my day was, like he always did. He poured himself a drink, like he always did. He even sat beside me on the couch, close enough to look normal. But something had shifted. Or maybe I had finally started seeing what was always there. The next morning, he made coffee again. Same routine. Same cups. Same quiet kitchen. But this time I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel unsure. I felt aware. And awareness changes everything. When he stepped away, I switched the cups again. Calmly. Naturally. Like it was something I had done my whole life. He came back, picked up his cup, and took a sip without hesitation. And in that moment, I realized something else. He trusted the routine more than he paid attention to it. From that morning on, and that was I stopped reacting and started observing. There's a difference. Reacting is emotional. It's immediate. It exposes you. But observing gives you power. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt like I had some control again. Marcus didn't change overnight. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it was the small things that began to stand out. The way he checked his phone more often, but never in front of me. The way his tone shifted when I asked simple questions. The way he seemed distracted even when he was sitting right beside me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was there. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I kept switching the cups every morning. Not just to protect myself anymore, but to understand how far this went. Each time, I watched him carefully. Sometimes, he looked completely normal. Other times, there was a flicker of something, discomfort, maybe. Not enough to raise suspicion, but enough to confirm something wasn't right. Days turned into weeks. And during those weeks, something else became clear. This wasn't rushed. It was patient. Calculated. And that made it more dangerous than anything else. One evening, I decided to test something. Not the cups this time, but him. I mentioned casually that I hadn't been feeling well lately. Nothing serious, just enough to see how he'd react. He paused for a second. Just a second. But I caught it. His response came quickly after, too quickly. "You're probably just tired," he said. "You've been through a lot." The words sounded right. But the tone didn't. There was no concern. No curiosity. No follow-up. Just dismissal. And that told me everything I needed to know. I expected. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. There's a certain kind of silence that reveals more than words ever could, and Marcus had started speaking in that silence more than anything else. I didn't bring it up again. I didn't need to. By then, I wasn't looking for reassurance. I was looking for truth. And the truth doesn't respond well to confrontation. It shows itself when you give it space. So I kept doing what I had been doing. Every morning, the same routine. The same kitchen. The same 2 cups sitting side by side like nothing had changed. But everything had. I would walk in, greet him like always, and wait for that small window of opportunity. The moment his attention shifted, the moment his back turned, and I would switch them. It became second nature. Almost effortless. And that's what made it dangerous. Because while he believed everything was under control, he had no idea the situation had already shifted. 2 weeks passed like that. Then 3. Then 4. And over time, I started noticing something else. Marcus was getting more careful. Not nervous, just careful. He began watching me more closely. Not in an obvious way, but in the way someone does when they're trying to confirm something. Sometimes I'd catch him glancing at my cup. Other times, he'd linger just a second longer before picking up his own. It wasn't enough to expose anything. But it was enough to tell me one thing. He was paying attention now. And that meant I had to be even more starting to pay attention, everything became more delicate. Before, I had the advantage of invisibility. He wasn't looking for anything, so he never saw anything. But now, there was awareness on both sides. Quiet. Unspoken. But real. That meant I couldn't afford mistakes. Every movement had to feel natural. Every action had to look like part of the same routine he trusted. I couldn't rush. I couldn't hesitate. Because hesitation is what people notice. So I adjusted. Instead of switching the cups immediately, I started waiting longer. Sometimes I'd distract him with a question. Something simple. Something harmless. Other times, I'd move casually around the kitchen, creating just enough motion to make the switch feel invisible. And every time, it worked. But something else started to change. The more careful he became, the more uncertain he looked. It wasn't obvious at first. Just a slight pause before picking up his cup. A brief glance between the two. A moment of hesitation that hadn't been there before. And hesitation is where control begins to break. Because routine only works when it's predictable. And now, it wasn't. There was one morning in particular that stood out. Everything started the same way. Coffee brewing. Cups placed on the counter. Silence filling the space between us. But when he turned back toward the counter, he stopped. Just for a second. His eyes moved between the cups. Not dramatically. Not enough for someone unaware to notice. But I saw it. And in that moment, I knew he didn't trust the routine as quickly as the others. Usually, everything moved without interruption. A smooth routine. Predictable. Safe. But this time, there was a crack in it. Small, but enough to change everything. Marcus stood there, looking at the cups longer than usual. Not frozen. Just uncertain. And uncertainty is dangerous when you've been relying on control. I didn't move right away. I let the silence sit between us. Let it stretch just enough to become noticeable. Then, slowly, I reached forward and picked up one of the cups. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I just held it there. That's when he spoke. Wait. It came out sharper than he intended. Too fast. Too immediate. And the moment it left his mouth, he knew it. But it was already too late. The room went completely still. I looked at him, not confused, not questioning, just calm. 2 months, I said quietly. He didn't respond. I've been switching them every morning. Silence. Not denial. Not shock. Just silence. And that silence said more than anything he could have tried to explain. His face changed, but not in the way you'd expect. There was no panic. No dramatic reaction. Just a slow realization settling in. Like he was replaying every morning in his head, every moment he thought was under control. I know about the policy, I added. That's when his eyes dropped. Not to me. To the floor. And that was it. No argument. No excuses. Because there weren't any. The truth didn't need to be proven anymore. It was already there. Everything that followed felt quiet. Not easy. Not painless. But quiet. Like the outcome had already been decided long before this moment ever arrived. The conversations were short. The distance between us grew naturally. And eventually. So did the ending. The divorce wasn't dramatic. There were no loud fights or drawn-out battles. Just signatures. Papers. Finality. Because when something breaks at that level, there's nothing left to repair. Months later, I found myself somewhere new. A different place. A different routine. Mornings that didn't feel heavy anymore. Coffee that didn't come with doubt. And for the first time in a long time, I felt clear. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. And in the end, that's what mattered. Because it wasn't the betrayal that changed everything. It was the moment I stopped ignoring what didn't feel right. The moment I started paying attention. The moment I trusted myself. Instead of the version of reality I had been given. And sometimes, the smallest decision, like switching 2 cups, can reveal the truth about everything, is what happens after. What stayed with me the longest wasn't the moment he spoke, or even the silence that followed. It was everything that came after. Because people think the hardest part of betrayal is discovering it. That sharp, sudden realization that something isn't what you believed it was. But the truth is, that's only the beginning. The real weight comes later. In the quiet. In the moments where everything looks normal on the outside, but nothing feels the same anymore. After that morning, the house felt different. Not tense. Not loud. Just empty in a way I couldn't explain. Marcus moved through the space like someone who didn't belong there anymore. And maybe, in a way, he didn't. We didn't argue. That's the part most people expect. They expect shouting, accusations, some kind of emotional explosion. But there was none of that. Because by the time the truth is that clear, there's nothing left to fight about. What would I even be arguing for? An explanation? A justification? There isn't one that makes sense after something like that. So instead, we existed in silence. Days passed where we spoke only when necessary. Simple things. Logistics. Nothing personal. Nothing real. It was like watching 2 people slowly step out of a life they once shared, without saying it out loud. And in those days, I started to notice something else. Relief. Not all at once. Not in a way that felt obvious. But in small moments. Waking up without that quiet tension sitting in my chest. Drinking my coffee without hesitation. Moving through my day without second-guessing every detail. It made me realize something I hadn't fully understood before. I hadn't just been ignoring signs. I had been living with them. Adjusting to them. explaining them away so I wouldn't have to face what they meant. And once that stopped, everything felt different. The divorce process was simple. Quick. Almost procedural. Papers were signed. Assets divided. Lives separated. And just like that, 15 years became something that existed only in memory. There was no dramatic ending. No final confrontation. Because the truth had already done all the work. Months later, I found myself in a new place. Smaller. Quieter. But it felt like mine in a way nothing had in a long time. I created new routines. New habits. And slowly, I started to recognize myself again. Not the version of me that had learned to overlook things. But the version that noticed. That trusted. That paid attention. And maybe that's the part people don't talk about enough. The way you lose pieces of yourself without realizing it. And the way you get them back, one decision at a time. Because in the end, it wasn't just about what he did. It was about what I allowed myself to ignore. And the moment I stopped doing that, everything changed. So if there's one thing I took from all of this, it's simple. When something feels off, don't rush to explain it away. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Pay attention. Because sometimes, the smallest detail, something as simple as a cup sitting in the wrong place, can tell you everything you need to know. Backhand index pointing right before we end, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, we'd love to hear from you.